So this is the titration of the antacid, and what Jim's done is he's poured about 75 mils of the approximately 0.1 molar HCl that we're going to use for today's experiment. The molarity should be on the bottle. And in the other beaker we've got sodium hydroxide. This is a sodium hydroxide that would have been standardized from the week before. Now you can either get this value from your instructor, or you'll use the value that you calculated based on the experiment you did last week when you standardized your sodium hydroxide with the KHP. In any case, it's going to be the same sodium hydroxide, so you'll already know what the molarity of that is going to be. Now over here we've got two burets, one marked A on the left and one marked B on the right, A for acid, B for base. And we're going to put the acid, the HCl, in the A buret, the first buret, and we're going to put sodium hydroxide in the second buret. We are going to clean the burets first with water and then with the stuff that we're going to put in them. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is just rinse it with water. We'll do this probably twice, and Jim's just going to show this once. He's going to have a waste beaker underneath there as well. He's going to collect the water in. So about 10 mils of water, we'll do that twice. And as it was last week, if it's going very slowly, just give it a bit of a tap. There's probably just an air bubble in it. So to be going okay. Alright, so he would have done that twice, and I want you to do that twice. But now we're going to go ahead and rinse it with whatever we're going to put in it. In this case, it's going to be the acid. So now we're going to add the acid. You'll notice we've got some funnels in the top here. He's just going to put about 10 mils in just to rinse it out. He'll do that twice. He's only going to show you once though, but you'll do it twice. There we go, just to rinse it out and make sure it's clean. I always like to rinse out a buret with whatever I'm going to put in it. Alright, it's good. Now let's go ahead and fill up the buret with the acid. And we're not going to show you this, but we're going to follow the exact same procedure with sodium hydroxide. We're going to rinse it twice with water, and then twice with the sodium hydroxide, and then fill the buret. Now Jim's going to fill this to a little bit below where the funnel is, so that it doesn't overflow out of the buret. Because we're not really interested in starting on zero, we don't have to do that. So he's going to measure exactly where we started, and we're going to use the same technique as we did last week. Why don't you go ahead and pull that down, and we'll put it in front of the camera, and we'll look at the measurement. So this is the measurement that we're looking at on the buret. You can see that the bottom of the meniscus, just move it down just a little bit. Please, Jim. There, perfect. And you can see that the meniscus, the bottom of the meniscus, is on the 2 line exactly. You'll see how it goes. It starts at the top as 1 and then goes 2 and then 3. That measurement there would be 2.00, always measured to 2 decimal places. If it was between the first line and the second line, it'd be 2.05. And if it was on the next line, it'd be 2.10. So we're going to measure that as 2.00, and that will be the initial measurement. So Jim has gone ahead and cleaned out the second buret. He's filled it now with the base as well. The other thing I want you to do is when you filled it, make sure you try and get any air bubbles out that might be in the bottom there. Jim's pointing at where you might find the air bubbles, and you can do that just by quickly turning it on and turning it off, or just turning the stopcock quickly, and that will hopefully fill the bottom of that buret there and remove any air bubbles. At that point you can go ahead and get the measurement, and we showed you how to do the measurement on the previous ones. Now we're going to weigh out approximately 0.1 grams of crushed tablet. Now, sometimes you might have a tablet that hasn't been crushed. In that case, you'll have to use a mortar and pestle to crush the tablet into a fine powder. Jim, could you show them the sample that we have here? This one has already been pre-crushed, and obviously there's a lot more than 0.1 of a gram there. So we're going to have to weigh it out. And the way we'll weigh this out is we will go ahead and put the weighing boat onto the analytical balance and close the door. And then we'll tear it and zero the balance. And then what we'll do is we'll take the weighing boat out. One thing we will not do is we won't weigh it directly into the weighing boat while it's on the balance, because that is a good way to make a big mess and cause the balance, which is about $6,000, to be ruined. So we're going to go ahead and just put a little bit into that weighing boat here. He's going to have to eyeball it a little bit. He doesn't know how much 0.1 of a gram is, and neither will you, but we're just going to put a little bit on there and just get an idea. And it doesn't have to be exactly 0.1, just somewhere in that ballpark. Yes, go ahead. And he's going to close that door there as well. And he put a little bit in there, and you can see it's about 0.04 of a gram. So he knows he has to put about maybe double what he has there, or a little bit more than that. And I'd expect you to do the same thing. Yeah, I don't want to see anybody weighing stuff while it's actually on the balance. You know, putting stuff on there while it's on the balance, I should say. Alright, that looks like it's going to be pretty good. Alright, so that's about 0.0974, which is pretty close to, or 0.0980 grams. That's pretty close to what we need. We need about 0.1 of a gram. And now we're going to take that and put it into an Erlenmeyer flask. So Jim's got a sample of antacid. He's going to go ahead and put it into the Erlenmeyer flask. So he's just kind of pouring it in there. Now I'd like you to show this part to the camera, Jim. See if you can show how you're going to rinse it off using the water here. Now it doesn't really matter how much water you use, because we're going to add acid to this later, but he's just going to rinse off that weighing boat with some water, and you can see that it's just going to go into the container here. Now I wouldn't expect this solid to dissolve. It may dissolve once we add the acid and boil it, but at the present time I wouldn't expect it to dissolve. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add, about 20 mils of hydrochloric acid?
Yeah, it's about 20 milliliters of acid.
Okay, so let's go ahead and add the acid from the burette. Now how much you add is not incredibly crucial. You just have to know exactly how much you're adding, but it's going to be around 20 mils. So we already know what we started with here, and he's going to take it down to about the 22 mark. Now we're going to repeat this. We're going to do it for 2 trials. We're not going to show you how we're setting up the second trial, because it's just going to be the same anyway. So you'll notice he's doing that same technique as he did last time, just putting his finger there just to give him an idea of where he has to stop it. That's good enough. So presently that's what we've got, about 20 mils of the acid in with the antacid tablet. Now if you look there, it's not too bad. I mean, it's a bit cloudy, but we are going to go ahead and boil this as well. We're going to make up a second sample, a second trial, and we'll know exactly how much we put in that as well. That'll be about 0.1 grams, again with about 20 mils of the acid. So I've got our 2 samples here with the antacid and the hydrochloric acid, and the idea here is we're going to boil this to try and get the carbon dioxide out of the solution. Jim, what are your thoughts about how vigorously to boil this?
My suggestion is to make it at least simmer for about 3 minutes. So I would not start your timer yet until you at least see some bubbles begin to form.
Right, and then just sort of take it at a simmering boil rather than a roaring boil?
Probably not a roaring boil. Yeah. We're not trying to make spaghetti, for example. We just want to get this bubbling so we get the carbon dioxide to leave the solution.
So you'll notice I've got the hot plate set up fairly high. It's on a fairly high value here, maybe about 3/4 of the way around on the dial. This is to make it so that it will boil in a reasonable time period. So we're going to stop here for a second. We'll wait for it to start boiling, and we'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to zoom in here. It looks like it's bubbling. You can see that it's not a bad bubble there. And I would probably turn it down at that point. Let's go ahead and turn it down. And I would boil it like that for about 3 minutes, and then let it cool, and then we can do the titration. Yeah, be careful not to breathe the fumes as well as they're coming off, because there could be some nasty stuff in there. Right now it's been boiling for 3 minutes. We're going to go ahead. We'll take off both trials at this point. So don't go ahead and leave the other one on there, even though you're only going to use the first one. So Jim's going to go ahead and take both off here. And we're going to let this sit until it's cool enough to touch. You actually don't have to wait until it's room temperature. In fact, if you wait too long, what can happen is the carbon dioxide can actually come back in to the solution. So we don't want to leave it so long that it cools that much that the carbon dioxide comes back in. So what we're going to do is we're going to just sit here and let this wait for a few minutes until we can actually carry it, and then we will do the titration. I just want to summarize what we've done so far and why we've done it. We've taken antacid, which is actually a base, and we've added acid to it. We've added an excess of acid to it to neutralize the entire antacid portion. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to titrate this with base so that we can see how much excess acid there was, and that'll give us an idea of how much base there was in the original antacid solution. Now, we've had this cooling for a bit, and Jim's going to go ahead and add 2 drops of phenolphthalein. Don't forget to add the phenolphthalein, otherwise you will not get a color change.
And if this was successful, you should notice the color is not pink.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. If you've added enough acid to make sure that you have indeed neutralized all of the antacid, then you should not have a pink color at this point. If you do have a pink color, it means you needed to add more acid to neutralize all of that antacid. Alright, so let's go ahead and do the titration, and we're obviously going to be adding the sodium hydroxide now, not the acid. That's why we're using the second burette. And we're going to be doing the same thing as we did before with the titration.
Now the instructions are written such that you should be able to reach the equivalence point from the distance of the base.
Right.
In the event that you would overshoot the equivalence point, you would need to add excess acid, and you may need to modify your data table in that event.
Right.
Now I do not know how much excess acid I put in, so I need to be fairly careful about the amount of base I'm adding.
Right, so it's not like you can add a whole bunch at the beginning. All you can really do is just add it fairly slowly. Now remember, we're doing 2 trials here. So the first trial, you'll have a pretty good idea of how much base to add, and then on the second trial you can go a little bit faster.
And if you notice, as soon as I add a drop of base, the pink color appears briefly and it quickly disappears.
Right.
That suggests I still have a fair bit of excess acid.
Yeah, go ahead and put it down and just add a little bit of the base there. You can see the pink appear and then disappear. So we've still got a fair amount. To add here. Now you'll notice that the antacid pretty much did dissolve, which is good. Now it looks like that pink color is beginning to persist a bit longer. Don't you think, Jim?
I agree.
Now one of the techniques, can I show you doing that technique with the spinning the stopcock there? If you want to add a really small amount, we showed you how you can just put a drop on the end, but another technique is just to really spin the stopcock really fast, and that will enable you to just put a very small amount of the base into the titration.
I'm still a little bit away from the equivalence point. I'm noticing the pink color is disappearing relatively quickly.
Now keep in mind that even after it's boiled, you might find that some of the antacid didn't dissolve. And the reason for that is because there's sometimes binding agents that aren't particularly water soluble.
Yes, the color is a bit cloudy still.
Yeah, but that's okay. That doesn't really affect anything. It certainly doesn't affect your ability to see the end point. So you notice we are being careful here. We don't really have the capacity to do a whole lot of trials of this, so that's why you've got to be careful, certainly the first time you do this on the first trial. You'll notice he's also rinsing off the burette just to try and get that little bit of base into the solution. There we go. I think we're very close now.
At this point, it's certainly pink.
Yes.
And it's not turning back the colorless, so I would definitely stop at this
So I'd
point.
stop it there. Now, if it goes too much more than that, then you would have to add a little bit more of the acid that we originally had to back titrate it and then continue adding the base. That's why we didn't get this volume before, after we added the 20 mils, just in case we do have to back titrate it, meaning we'd have to add a little bit more acid to stop the overshoot and then add more base to get it back to pink. But this pink color we've got here isn't too bad. I'd like something a little lighter, but this is okay. I think we can deal with this. And then what we will do is just take whatever value we see on the burette there, and that will be our addition of base, and that's the end of that trial. Now we do have a second trial that we would do as well, which I'm not going to show, but you would probably, as long as you added about the same amount of antacid initially, then you'd expect to be adding about the same amount of the base to do this part of the titration.